I'm so happy you're here. Right now, you are halfway through the course. It's not really over. In the last four modules, we've learned a tremendous amount on dying, death, and grieving. From holding space during the most treacherous time of our grieving journeys, to learning about the five stages of grief, to getting a better understanding why mental health is so important, and finally creating spaces to allow our loved ones who've just lost their life to come into our everyday lives. We've really created a strong foundation in grieving in a healthy way. In the next two modules, I'm going to be focusing on the afterlife. The knowledge that I present to you now hopefully will spark a curiosity in leading a more spiritual life. You can come with a pen and paper, you can put on your favorite outfit, but all I ask for you to do in these next two modules and in the bonus module at the end of the course is to have an open mind. Some of the information that I present to you might not be familiar to you. It might be hard to follow. You might want to rebel against it. However, when we open our minds, we open our hearts. And when we open our hearts, we have better access to the people who just lost their life. In the end, after completing these next two modules, you'll have a better sense and a better knowing that it's not really over. Like you, I lost a loved one not too long ago. I'm actually on year 3 of my grieving journey, but on certain days, like the day of his birth and the day that he died, it's hard. And like I told you in previous modules, grief comes in waves, it waxes and wanes. It's not linear, it will pop up randomly. And so, in this next module, I'm going to be sharing with you what I did when I decided that I wanted to be closer with my nephew that had passed. Because I never had the opportunity in meeting him, it really took a toll on me. And I began to question things. The night that he died, I was in New York City and I was alone while my immediate family was in St. Louis, Missouri, grieving his death. And I'll never forget that night just because I looked up and I saw the sky. I was standing on my rooftop in East Village, and it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Um, and as the sky was changing from pink to blue to purple to orange to yellow, there was just this little sliver of a moon. And I just remember feeling so much peace in that moment, knowing that he no longer needed to suffer. And little did I know that that moment would spark such a curiosity to the practices of astrology and numerology. And after 4 months of him being gone, I started my astrology certification process with Rebecca Gordon, and life has not been the same. And I truly believe that the reason why Fitz came down onto this earth was to touch the lives of me and my immediate family and to change the course or to get us back on the path. So, with that, if you're still with me, because that wasn't easy to share, but I would really, really enjoy letting you all know that it really is not over. It's not. I truly believe that his energy is still looming, and there's quite a possibility that his soul has come back or will come back. And so I hope that my personal story helps introduce some of the topics that we're going to be talking about. So, like I said, I got curious. I am not a religious person, even though growing up, I went to many, many Catholic grade schools. I learned about different religions all around the world while I was at a Catholic high school. And I went to many field trips where I visited different places of worship. So I understood there was religion outside of Catholicism. I decided at a young age during my adolescence that I wasn't going to get confirmed in the Catholic Church just because I just felt like I didn't really align with everything that was in the Bible, and so I thought it would be wrong to be confirmed in a church that I totally didn't agree with. So my religious journey kind of ended prematurely. I was fairly young, where I was about 14 when I decided that, Catholicism wasn't going to be my end all be all. And so from 14 until I was about um, 27, that is a long stretch of time. I didn't really do much to connect with my soul, my spirit. And I am so happy that once, my family and I were put in this situation where we had to really start to grieve Fitz's death, it did spark a curiosity of spirituality for me. And like I said, my life has not ever been the same since Fitz came onto this earth and left this earth in such a short period of time. He only lived 1 hour, but in that hour, so much shifted for me. And I know I can say the same for my immediate family. So, in astrology, you learn a lot about archetypes, and each sign, there's 12 signs in Western astrology, which is what I am a master in. You learn about each sign's archetypes, and you learn about the story of the zodiac. And each sign represents each part of life. Aries begins the zodiac wheel, and Pisces ends the zodiac wheel. And through astrology, I was able to really understand the different ins and outs of a person and the personality. And so, of course, I started to look at my family members that were still living, their natal astrology birth charts, and I began to piece together their personality. But once Fitz passed away, I really took it upon myself to get certified and to learn more into this ancient practice of astrology. And what I learned when I looked at his chart was that his chart had some very, very compelling planetary transits that told his story. Fitz is a Gemini sun, a Leo moon, and a Scorpio rising. And when I saw what I saw when I looked at his whole chart, is a little boy that was extremely brave. The doctors warned my sister and my brother-in-law that there would be absolutely no way for little Fitz to survive a natural birth because he had underdeveloped organs and no kidneys, that it would be too traumatic. Um, and going back to the ancient practice of astrology, Aries does start off the zodiac, and you want to think about going head first into birth. It's actually a traumatic experience for a soul, even. So we were preparing for a stillborn, but on June 7th at 5:15 Central Standard Time in St. Louis, Missouri, Fitz was born alive. And that in that particular day, the moon was shining in Leo. And like I told you, when I stood up on my rooftop in East Village, I saw a little tiny sliver of the moon. And having a moon in Leo is just so powerful for little Fitz because that is a sign of bravery. That's a sign of, hey, look at me, I'm here. And boy, did he do that, because it was such a blessing that he was born alive. It allowed my sister and her husband, Fitz's dad, to have a beautiful moment together as a family. And it was just absolutely gorgeous that he was there alive. And his vehicle, being a Scorpio rising, was presented in a vehicle where it was delicate and death was definitely upon him. And we all knew that. And you could kind of tell with the way he looked, but overall he was just absolutely beautiful. Um, but we knew that he wasn't going to last long. So that was his vehicle, Scorpio. And Scorpio is related to death. And then being a Gemini sun, the tale of Gemini is being in two places at once. Life and death, really, holding hands with each other, being in the afterlife, but being here on the physical realm on Earth. And so it was almost like after he did pass away, even though I was not in St. Louis, I was, because I could feel him and the presence of him with me in New York. So it was like him being in two places at once. So that is the first introduction practice that I'm going to talk about the afterlife. But in astrology, there are a lot of points in the sky that are connected to reincarnation or past lives, current life. And one of those is, a north node and a south node. And so I talk a lot about that with my clients, always in talking about the north node, south node. And, I've taken a course on that with another person that really enjoys astrology, Dara Dubonnet. But overall, astrology was the first practice that really started to spark a curiosity in spirituality. So if you're interested in, learning more about astrology, or if you feel like it's going to help you in this journey, I have another course named 12 that you can definitely learn more about. And maybe that will help spark your curiosity to lead a more spiritual life. Well, once you start astrology, you really don't stop, and you start to have curiosity about other things. And so numerology was the next practice that I began, and I actually taught myself, went to a store called Enchantments in New York City, picked up this book, and with a double accounting major, I've always really been fascinated about numbers. And through numerology, I've enhanced my services. But overall, I've learned a lot about arrows, and arrows are a big thing, kind of connected to north node, south node. What is your path and why are you the way you are? And so, just using both astrology and numerology really, really helped me focus on something greater. I feel like when someone does pass away, you get really bogged down on the details, and it's very easy to do that. And it's extremely common, and I was there before. But when you have practices like astrology and numerology, it really does help take off the pressure. So after that, I was still not fully satisfied. I wanted more, I wanted to learn more. And so as my community started to grow and the network that I created with astrology and numerology began to flourish, I started to meet people in these different realms. And, I've talked about Reiki, which I connected with this beautiful woman from Germany named Nicole. But I also started to connect with people that were really interested in reincarnation and the afterlife and just spiritual practices like past life regressions or Akashic Records readings. And so I did get to work with a couple different women. And during those times when I worked with them, Morgan and Nikki Cosmo, I just found such a connection to people that had passed. Not only Fitz, but my grandparents that all passed away many, many years ago. And I found this new connection that I had with them on the other side versus when they were here on Earth. I do want to share a really quick story just on how that works, but Akashic Records are records that you have access to the collective unconscious. So every experience, feeling of the human race is all stored in this records called the Akashic Records. And you have access to that when you work with someone like Morgan. And when I was working with Morgan, I had access to my spirit guides and my family of light, and my grandfather on my father's side, who I barely knew, really did come forward. And so it's just been a beautiful journey that I've been experiencing with him in particular, where we have really developed a relationship, even though he's already passed. And the same thing happened in a past life regression, where I was shown some people in my soul family, and it happened to be my grandfather and my father now. Now, you're probably kind of a little lost in what I'm saying, if especially you're not particularly spiritual. However, I really, really want you to continue to open up your mind. I'm going to go back to these topics in the next module and open up a little bit further on them. But what I really want to recommend to you next in this part of your grieving journey is to get curious and think about doing things that are out of your comfort zone. Don't play in one sandbox. Try to do new things, whether that's astrology, numerology, tarot card, whatever gets you kind of quiet. Reiki is fantastic. Obviously, that was the first module, but also read. In fact, even after I got certified as an astrologist, continued to learn numerology, have a past life regression, do hypnotherapy sessions and Akashic Records reading, I still wanted to learn more. And so, what I thought would be so beautiful was to pick up a book that my mother's father had. So, my grandfather on the maternal side of my family had. I knew that when I picked up the book that Grandpa Jack would 100% have some underlining and writing in the book, and I was right. And so all these books are by psychic medium Sylvia Brown from Kansas City, Missouri. And like I said, the first one was my grandfather's, and it was just so remarkable to go through the book and to see underlines and tabs that were pinned and all the notes. But my grandfather got really into Sylvia Brown's books after his wife, my grandmother, passed away. And he was a different type of person where when she was nearing death and it was clear to the hospice workers that she was about to die, that my grandfather really, really encouraged her to look for the light. And, growing up, I didn't really know what he was talking about. So I found that kind of funny. But once I read this book, Life on the Other Side, I understood what he was doing for Beverly. And so these books that are also Sylvia Brown, I found these on a walk in New York City. And it was right after I finished the Sylvia Brown book for my grandfather. And I just was walking down the street and I saw a pile of books and was like, if I go up to those and they're Sylvia Brown books, that's definitely a sign that my grandfather Jack is trying to communicate to me. And that is exactly what happened. So I got curious. I read these books by Sylvia Brown. I continued to read. And this book was given to me by someone that works at NYU, but it also talks a lot about near death experiences and everything of that nature. But overall, all of these books, and I think I've mentioned every one of them except two, the Old Souls Guidebook and Happy Pocket Full of Money. In general, all of these books that I've listed, all of these different authors, they all have one thing in common, and they're all explaining that there is an afterlife, that there is life after death. And in many religions, like Catholicism, we believe in heaven. Now, many of these authors where I've read these books talk about a space called home or the other side. But in general, this is where the soul wants to go. In fact, like I talked about when I was talking about astrology, being birthed into this world is way more traumatic than dying. A soul would actually prefer death over birth just because the soul is going back to the light. They're looking for the light. And supposedly, when our soul leaves our physical body, it's feelings of great joy and peace and serenity. And our soul is going home. And when we go home, we get to see all the people that we've known through every lifetime. And it's just a beautiful experience. And some authors write that when we're home or we're on the other side, or what we like to call heaven, we're all at a certain age. So there's no children, there's no old people. It's just everyone's 30. That's what Sylvia Brown suggests. Overall, it really doesn't matter. The details do not matter. Maybe your belief is that when we go home or to heaven, that we are the way we are when we died. Who knows? But in general, the soul of that person continues on. And it's just like that scientific, equation that energy is never destroyed. And it's the same type of thing. So if you've ever met somebody in this lifetime where you felt like you knew them before, there could be a possibility that that is true. Or you're coming into this lifetime and you're meeting people and you believe that they're angels. I would recommend keep believing that. Angels are among us, and the people that have passed are trying to communicate with us 100%. I don't know if you've ever read or listened to the audiobook Signs by Lauren Lynn Jackson, but that is something I will also talk about in a later module, and that's a beautiful audiobook as well. But overall, I hope that opening your mind to all of this, like I said earlier, is opening your heart. And when you do that, you have a greater possibility of connecting to your loved one that has passed away.